It's your one-stop shop. Great wrestling. WrestleCopia.com, where you'll find an armload of great wrestling podcasts. Some are weekly, some are not. All of them are great. Ray Russell brings WrestleCopia to you, including his own show, The Wrestling Memory Grenade. There's Regional Wrestling, The Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, the Pure Wrestling Academy, Retro Wrestling Review with Gene Jackson, Dave Dynasty's Wrestling Nostalgia, Monday Warfare, Raw vs. Nitro, the Other Shit podcast, the Captain's Corner podcast, and much, much more. Great host, great shows. I guarantee you'll learn something every time you tune in to the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Where do you find all these shows? How about starting it this way? Just log on to WrestleCopia.com. There's nothing else like it anywhere. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. This time, we're going to take another look at wrestling books with Steve Gennarelli from the Stick to Wrestling podcast with John McAdam. So here's my favorite wrestling book. I'm going to read you a passage right here. Paper cut. Damn it. That's smarts. It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Anybody got some Mercurochrome? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. My name is Bob Smith. You might remember me from my era at Pro Wrestling Illustrated and a whole stack of other wrestling magazines. Our co-host is Joe Puccio of GenerationXWire.com. Joe, welcome back. You took a week off there. You had a nice little cruise, from what I understand, and lived the high life for a solid week. Congratulations on that. I am jealous as all get out.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, it's great to be back. Although, in all honesty, part of me still wishes I was on that cruise, but no offense to you. This is a nice thing to come back to be able to get back into this. But yeah, went on a cruise, Alaskan cruise with my wife and my sister and brother-in-law. Great time. Highly recommend it for anyone that's never done that before. We had a great time. But back to reality now and back to the grind, as they say, right?
It is amazing when you go on vacation like that. You have a cabin on the cruise, right?
Correct.
It's amazing when you do things like that. After 2 days, you're very comfortable with it and you know every nook and cranny of it. And it's like, the minute it all feels like normal, you have to leave.
Yeah.
That's the problem with vacations. If a vacation is a month long, it's still too short.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. And the one thing I was worried about, this was actually my first cruise that I've ever taken in my life. One thing I was a little concerned with going on, I was like, I wonder, people say you could feel the boat, you could I know it's a humongous ship, of course, but you can still feel the rocking and, some people have a little bit of a tough time with that. And yeah, I can tell you definitely did feel it, especially when you're trying to sleep, you get in that bed and you feel it going back and forth. But I have to say, thankfully, I was fine. Never had any issues. I was indulging and taking advantage of the drink package that we purchased. That really came in handy. So maybe that helped a little bit. But, again, back to normal now. And it's been a little rough, back to my day job. But again, I'm just happy that we had the opportunity to do it. And I'm sure there'll be another one in our future.
So let's talk wrestling with Joe Puccio, the Lush, and we'll get along. Well, I guess now mixed spirits will replace Carvel as our food conversation moves forward. Or maybe both. Who knows how that works. The show tonight will be our good friend Steve Gennarelli. We're talking about our favorite books, new books, old books, Brian Sullivan's book has finally come out about Gorilla Monsoon. You're reading it. I have read it. I have an interview coming up on an upcoming show with Brian about the book. I actually attended his book signing this past Sunday in Connecticut. It was fantastic. You know who showed up? Tom Burke. I never met Tom Burke. Tom Burke, the Old Time Wrestling magazine editor and writer.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I marked out. I saw him there, and I knew his picture from Facebook, and I've never met him in all these years. I just marked out, rushed over, and Tom Burke, you were such a big influence, blah, blah, blah. And he was the nicest guy.
Oh, that's cool.
The nicest man. He is coming on the show, by the way.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And wants to come on the show. He loved he loved the name The Outdated Wrestling Hour, so he'll definitely come on. And so that was one nice thing. But anyway, as far as books go, I think I speak for Joe and myself. We can't recommend Brian Sullivan's book enough.
I have the book actually right next to me here, but I believe I'm in about 105 pages into to Brian's book, the Gorilla Monsoon book. It's fantastic so far. And, again, I'm 100 pages in, and it hasn't even scratched the surface yet of anything. It's going into everything: his childhood, his family, his origins, his grandparents, and coming here from Italy. And it's really fascinating. And so far, I mean, again, I think I'm right now at a part where he just got to the WWF, whenever that was in the early 60s. But I mean, he just barely got there, and it's already pretty riveting. So really looking forward to what's coming, because obviously then it's going to be more stuff that, you're familiar with, stuff that you've seen him, things in his career. But I think right now it's right at that point where, talking about him and Bruno Sammartino's friendship and how they got together. And it's just such great stuff. And yeah, I mean, Brian's such a great author, a great writer. He really digs deep. And already I'm wondering, as I'm reading this, I'm saying, like, the research, like, how did he find out all this stuff? It's so detailed.
Brian is very smart in his game plan when it comes to doing a book. I've had 1,000 conversations with him about it. And here's the key. You write without a release date in mind. You write without saying this has got to come out in August. You write and you take your time and you research as thoroughly as you can before you even put your fingers on that keyboard to write. Because it's like something like this. And again, it's another subject matter who is not with us anymore. A lot of the people who are around him are not with us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And who do you contact? Who do you talk to? How do you dig up the right sources for material? I understand that WWE was quite happy with the project and actually contributed photos for the book, which is a rarity. Like, I've never heard that before, that they would contribute some stuff. So I can't say enough about both Brian and the book. I have an autograph book. Now, I don't want to tell you what he wrote in case somebody else goes and gets his autograph. He writes the coolest thing when he autographs his book. So he's got a great sense of humor, Brian. You would know it. Brian is kind of dry-ish when you talk to him.
Yeah.
But once you get to know him, he has a robust sense of humor. Doesn't take himself too serious. He's got a great family, too. And I know that has nothing to do with the book, but again, I'm jealous at his research abilities. It's like astounding. Well, you know why that is? Everything I wrote, I had to get it done in 2 days in my whole life. I was a news writer and a magazine writer. So you got to get it done right now. There was any research. It was kind of, let's say, surface research. You find out the nuts and bolts of something, and then you move on to something else because you didn't have time to really get your fingernails dirty. Brian was the opposite. He gets his whole body dirty, if that makes any sense. But just tremendous. My question that keeps running around my mind, what's next for him?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with the part about, no release date or no time frame in mind, because that's what I was thinking, because that's one of my things when I write, when I'm writing my stories, when I do my interviews and I have to write something, not that I really have a due date, so to speak, but it's also something that is fairly timely. It's something that I don't want to get backed up. So I feel like I'm always in that mindset as a writer that if I am speaking to somebody and I want to get a story out, I want to do it fairly quickly. I want to get it out within a few days, so sometimes I do tend to rush. So I feel like there's definitely a sense of freedom in something like what he's doing here, because like you said, I don't know, honestly, how long he's been doing this. I know he mentioned it. I don't remember, but I know he's probably been doing this for so many years that he started it, and not to actually have a deadline where you have to have it done. by a certain date, that must be in a way very freeing because yeah, I mean, you could really take your time. You could dig in deep. And like I said, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at this thing and I'm just like, I don't know how he found out these tiny, he's mentioning these really, really obscure cities and towns in Italy and
Yeah.
the mountain villages. And then they came here and he met, his grandfather met his wife, when they were 12 at this age, at this place and everything. I'm like, how does he know this stuff? So again, it's really, I definitely commend them for that. And I would love to, and I'm planning on it once I finish the book. I'm trying to get through it fairly quickly, but yeah, I definitely want to speak to him and do a nice feature on my website with him as well.
So I was also shocked how thick the book was.
It's so thick, I know.
It is, right? I mean, seriously, this thing could be a chair in many New York City apartments. No, seriously, it is more pages than the Chic book was. Brian, I think, in his heart and mind, considers this his greatest achievement. It may be. It may be. We just, it's funny. We did our little informal rankings. You'll hear that me and Steve did. And, we both liked his other book as well. I'm not going to tell you what the rankings were, but it's like, how do you choose between? There's the thing. The beauty part about Brian's books is they're not myopic. In other words, Gorilla did this, then he did that. No, it talks about the surrounding circle that he was in. The same with the Chic book, the territories that he traveled to, what was going on in the battle for bucks back in the 70s, That's the stuff that really excites me. To learn something decades later I had no idea what was going on seems almost impossible. So he's got it going on, man. I tell you what, writers like him, Ian Douglas, we are living in an era now where we're lucky these guys even want to do wrestling. These guys could write anything.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before. I think we've spoken about it. I said we're sort of in the it's a cliche, but I feel like we're in the midst of a golden era of wrestling writers because I don't think anybody ever really expected it to be this good.
Exactly.
And I think it really started, and again, I don't know if I feel like it really started with Foley. When he came out with that book, his first book, people bought it. I mean, it was pretty successful, and I remember buying it.
It was very successful.
And I remember buying it because I think, to be honest with you, I don't know if I was going to buy it, but I remember it was out and it was getting these great reviews. It might have been Meltzer who maybe touted it. Maybe he was talking about it in the Observer or something. And I said, let me get this. And I said, let me go get this. And I bought it and I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, Mick Foley wrote this? And no offense to Mick Foley, but nobody ever, thought of him as someone that would be able to write a book that good. And it really was. And I think that sort of started it.
Well, I spent a lot of time with him early on. Some people would beg to differ. I insist he's one of the brightest professional wrestlers I've ever met. And, I saw on Dark Side of the Ring, he was saying he's having many memory problems. I found it to be the opposite. Every time I talk to him, he remembers little nuggets about where we were back in 1991, 88. It's like, I think he's got a good memory, but only he would know if it's failing. You can't base it on the wrestling anecdotes and stuff like that. No, I think he's a super, super intelligent fellow.
Yeah, I think now we all realize that he is. I mean, so many years later, now that he's been out of wrestling for so long and now he's been on talk shows and he's, the sound bites and we can all tell. I mean, the guy is obviously an intelligent guy. We know that. I just feel like back then when he first put out that book, it was still sort of clouded in mystery. It's like, oh, is this really Foley? But
you could hear his voice in those words. It was so personal.
Yeah. And from then, and then they were just different authors and different people writing books and it just really changed because I know that when I was a kid, the wrestling books that were out were for the most part picture books, they were photo books, which nothing wrong with that. I mean, you want to get books with pictures, coffee table books, but there weren't really any of those intense, really great stories.
But this is why I want you to listen intently to the segment with Steve Gennarelli, because we go back in time and we pick some old books that are a little more inside than you think they would have been in the time frame when they were written. And I'm sure you haven't heard of a couple.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And I'll say it again even before we start. Crowbar Press. If you want classic wrestling books, that's the place to go.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
I'm familiar with
they're
them.
the
Yeah.
source. They really are,
Mhm.
and they had stuff in print that they didn't think was in print. So that the hats up to them, because we need more of this. We got to keep the memories of the old school stuff alive. We do. I'm not even kidding. Why do you think I'm so excited about going to Hall of Fame events and stuff like that? It's because I get to meet and mingle with the guys who I grew up watching. Oh, it feels good.
Yeah, seriously, I'm sure.
It just feels good. I mean, let us. I don't mean to be corny. Let us enjoy each other's company while we're still here. You don't know when fate will throw you a curve and things change in your personal life and stuff. I'm very thankful for all the people I've hung out with throughout my life, and I've lost some of them. I've lost many of them, to be honest with you. But to be able to go back in time and see people that you don't see as often and people that you work, I used to write about and stuff like that, and they remember it. It's a stone cold gas, man.
Yeah.
I've been very lucky in that regard. You
Yeah,
too. You
for
too.
sure.
Right now, I think you're having a personal renaissance with your Generation XY website in that you are tackling things that you know what name of your website could be? Oh yeah, that would be the name of the website because it's like you bring up stuff that people used to love and they may have forgotten about or just pushed aside because it's the stuff. Let's say it's an old TV show or a record or like what did you have? Remember the hats, right?
Oh, yeah, right, Men Without Hats.
You've
Yeah,
had What's Happening,
yeah, yeah.
you know, Land of the Lost. You really floored me with that one. That one of all of them was like he's doing an article on Land of the Lost. My goodness.
Yeah,
So
it's the stuff that has always intrigued me and, you know, even the stuff coming up, like we talked about Rich Little. No, I completely agree with you, and even speaking to what you were saying about how you've dealt with a lot of these people, these wrestlers, and you've been friends with them and you know them. I mean, you said keeping the old timers alive. When I was in my first meetings with a lot of these guys at those early Weekend of Champions conventions when Arezzi used to do those
yeah,
conventions,
yes.
that was the first time I met a lot of these legends. And you remember at those things, Bruno was there, Buddy
Mhm.
Rogers was there, the Fabulous Moolah. There were so many great old timers, Luthez and people like that. You look back now and I'm like, man, I don't know if I appreciated those guys as much as I wish I had because back then I was a kid and, I was probably more interested in looking at the current guys and, maybe the people from the 80s and on. But I mean, now that I look back and I see the pictures I took with them and I see it, I'm like, man, I really wish I can have a conversation with Killer Kowalski now. I remember Killer
Yeah.
Kowalski was just sitting on the couch and we were all hanging around him. But you're a kid. What are you gonna talk to him about? But
But,
yeah,
here I was at a full-grown adult having dinner, an impromptu
yeah,
Saturday night dinner with Buddy Rogers.
yeah, yeah,
"Sit down, Pally, it's good to see you." I mean, and
yeah,
what did we talk about? Oh, these promoters these days. You know what we talked about.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
juxtaposition between his era and what was going on then, so. Well, anyway, good to have you back, Joe. We're gonna segue into our little feature here with Steve Gennarelli. It's gonna be fun. Steve never lets you down, does he? He's quite a guy.
Yeah, he is. He's a character, isn't he?
But he's creative as all
Yeah,
heck.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
always, I love the guy. He's always saying, "Bob, we should do blah blah blah," and I'll go, "Yeah, sure," and that's basically as far as it goes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And here's the thing: a couple of our guests have come back at me with ideas, concepts for shows. Sometimes they're good, and sometimes I don't think they fit the format.
Uh-huh.
The only ones that really turn out are the ones that if they're too current or something like that. It's got to stay with our aging format.
Uh-huh.
It's just the way the show is. So, been very happy to have all the guests we've had. We've got some more cool ones coming up. And wait 2 minutes. It's Steve Gennarelli from Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam on the Arcadian Vanguard Network. Count to 12. We'll be right back. Remember Winnie the Pooh? Winnie the Pooh used to say, "It's always a lovely day when Christopher Robin comes to play." Well, it's always a wonderful day for me when Steve Gennarelli shows up. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Hey, Bob, it's great to be back. And, we were talking offline, I think yesterday, we were talking about wrestling. And one thing that we both kind of agreed on, that this is kind of like a golden age of wrestling books and wrestling literature. And we got to talking with each other. We kind of mutually decided wouldn't it be fun to kind of like compare notes and make a list of our favorite wrestling books that we've ever come upon, or the ones we think are the most important. So I thought that'd be something we could talk about tonight.
Once again, your creativity astounds me because it's like, I'm like anybody else when you're doing a podcast. I know you and John McAdam. And by the way, I should mention that Steve, as you know, is part of Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam podcast on Arcadian Vanguard Network. And I'm sure you guys, when you sit down to do a podcast, the first thing you got to think of, what are we talking about? Right? And have you ever sat down with John and you look at each other and go, what are we doing now? Has that ever happened?
No, it's never happened, and because this is really his baby, this is his show. He's the idea guy, and he comes up with the ideas. I think the only really memorable idea that I ever brought on board was I had this magnificent idea. I told him, I said, "We're going to have a special guest, and his name is Bob Smith," and then I came up with it on my own. Other than that episode where you made your debut,
You
on
know,
Stick to
at that
Wrestling, that was
point in
about
my
it.
at that point in my history, I'm surprised he said yes, to be honest with you. So, but no, he's been kind enough to have me on the show once by myself,
Yes,
and I just had John on recently, and he was great.
I
I mean,
enjoyed that.
and I had you on recently. You were great. Now you're back. So, yes, it's books. It's like you said. This is sort of a golden era for wrestling journalism through books. There have never been better historical tomes written than the ones I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. It's really been something else. And you can go back a few years, like George Shire's book about Minneapolis wrestling is
Right.
required reading. I mean, it's got everything you'd ever wanna know about the old AWA and Indianapolis territories. It's almost like something you would refer to, like Baseball Reference, you know? You would go back to check big historical moments.
No, that's a great comparison there, and what you just said reminds me of a question I was gonna ask you. Being that we are in this golden era or golden age of wrestling books, in your head, like, just as a participant or reader yourself, is there, like, one book that hasn't been written yet where you'd say, "God, this is what I would like to have in my hands to just start reading right now"? Like, is there one thing you can think of? Because I know for me, there is something I would like.
I would like to see a wrestling book with an author's name on it, but it would have 100 short chapters, and each short chapter would be written by a former professional wrestler. Could
Really?
be could be a preliminary guy, could be a superstar. Just people who would never think of writing a book may be able to tell you things, like, on a tape that you could transcribe
Mhm.
and have their thoughts about their career simplified in 2 to 4 pages.
Wow.
And I think that would be wonderful. It's like, All the World's a Wrestler would be the title,
Wow.
and it would be something undone before. Like, we've seen full biographies,
Right.
but, you find a lady wrestler from the 1960s, you find a rookie who's trying to break in the indies today, you find a former NWA world champ. There will be any number of people out there.
Right. Mhm.
Now the question is, would wrestlers do it because there's not a financial incentive to it?
Right.
But we have seen wrestling books where many different wrestlers have been quoted, and it comes up in the part of research on the part of the author. So I don't know. That would be my idea. It would almost be like All the World's a Wrestler. That would be the title.
I love that. That's such a great answer because I never thought you'd come up with something like that. That's completely unique and like nobody's ever thought of that before, which is an outstanding idea. I mean, for me, my book that hasn't been written yet, and I've mentioned this maybe on your show. I've mentioned this on John McAdam's show and other shows. I've always dreamt of there being this like huge jumbo encyclopedic size book, kind of like the Bill James historical abstract of pro wrestling. And I have that book on my shelf, his baseball historical abstract, and they have biographies of players, they have comparisons of players from different eras, and I would just love a book like that written about like different decades of wrestling, the stars of the 60s, the 70s, the 50s, today. It just, I mean, it would be a hell of a task for somebody to do. But I will make a recommendation. This isn't a book, but actually more like a website. If someone's interested in that kind of a thing, or looking at somebody's research that they've done about decades and wrestlers, I can't think of a better site that I could recommend than if you go to wrestlingclassics.com, if you go to in the back, Steve Yohe, who's a well-known wrestling historian from California, he has his own page on wrestlingclassics.com, and he's gone back and he has a year for the years that the Wrestling Observer didn't cover, say from prior to 1980 or so, all those years before the Observer, he's created like an Observer Wrestler of the Year for all those years. And he's listed who it is, who the runner-ups would be, and has like detailed explanations of why, say, superstar Billy Graham was the wrestler of 1977 and it wasn't someone else. So that's a site I would recommend to the listeners. But we are going to get back to wrestling books. So I wanted to ask you, Bob. I know we both came up with lists of wrestling books. Did you have any that just barely didn't make the list, or did you have any like honorable mentions?
I didn't really, because my list is comprised of some great literature and some fun stuff, all
Okay.
all in the top 10. In fact, I have a tie at number 8
Okay.
because the books aren't really literature; they're more like historical books.
Okay.
Not historical. Someone who's involved in wrestling, looking back type of thing, and a lot
I
of
like that.
photograph-driven books. That's what I'm trying to say, actually.
Okay.
Photography-driven. I have read a lot of wrestling books over the years. I have books on my list, though, that I read, and I can't find the books anymore.
Right.
I'm
Well,
getting of age now where, I've moved about, 20 times in my adult life. Moved.
right. It's a
And what
lot.
do you do when you move?
You
Sometimes you
lose
say, "Do
things.
you need this anymore?" No, well, let's trash it because we don't wanna take it with us, that type of thing.
Yeah,
Every time you move, you throw things away,
it's
and then
true.
5 years later, you go, "Why did I throw that away?"
Right.
Right? So, a lot of the stuff that I had and kinda treasured, I have kind of jettisoned, and I kind of regret it, but you know what? The memories, you can't take them away from me, so,
No,
um
absolutely. And I will say, I mean, and I would like to say this is true of Bob's list as well, even though I haven't seen his list yet. I think it would be safe to say that every book that we're going to be mentioning on this show, you'll either be able to get it through Amazon.com or Scott Teal's Crowbar Press, which has a gazillion wrestling books, highly recommended.
Mhm.
And if those two somehow fail you, eBay I'm sure has them. But anyhow, we have a great list here to talk about.
But, the beauty part too, I don't know Steve's list, and he doesn't know mine.
That's right. We're going to
So
learn
let's see how
together.
many we're going to duplicate. I have a feeling there'll be at least 1 or 2. Do you think so too?
Oh yeah, there's going to be some that we definitely have on both, but there's going to be some that definitely neither one of us will have, or that one of us will just have. But I did want to mention there's some honorable mentions that didn't make my list, but that they were very noteworthy and I felt deserved acknowledgement. Now, the book that kind of kicked off this whole idea of having mass marketed wrestling books, and this one was actually on the New York Times bestseller list, was Mankind's book. I think it came out in 1999. Mick Foley's book called Have a Nice Day, which was on the bestseller list of the New York Times for many, many weeks. And that kind of kicked the ball rolling on WWE having many of their major stars having book releases and many of them landing on the New York Times list as well. But that was the one that was kind of the standout that really started the ball rolling. There was a book that I found really fascinating right around that same time frame, 1999. John Molinaro, who's a guy, I think he's up in Canada, he put together a book, and Dave Meltzer, I think, did the forward. It was called The Top 100 Pro Wrestlers of All Time. And it was a really neat book. It had like 2 pages on every wrestler on the list and had photos. And it was a really neat look back on who he thought were the top wrestlers of all time. Larry Matisick, the legendary gentleman who was connected to the St. Louis promotion, he put together many, many good wrestling reference books. My favorite of his books was The Top 50 Wrestlers of All Time, which was this really comprehensive look at who he felt were the top 50. And he had tons of notes and tons of research saying why these people made the list. And there were countless other books on here as well. we can't list them all, but those are my honorable mentions, Bob.
I'm going to let you start. Are we going to go from 10 to 1 like we have done on previous lists? Would you like
I
to do
I
that format?
I feel that would be fair. And now number 10, if you want me to get it started, number 10 is a book that, to be honest with you, I haven't really read this book, but the stature of the book kind of precedes it. This book, this is a deep cut. This book is called The Fall Guys by Marcus Griffin. And this came out in 1937. And if you listen to the Jim Cornette show with Brian Last, this book probably comes up more often than any other wrestling book, because this book at the time in 1937 explained the business, talked about how the business was done in that era. And a lot of wrestling historians and experts like Steve Yohe, who I mentioned earlier, they felt that this book was so profound and so unique that they were making photocopies of this old book and selling it or trading it or giving it to their fellow historian friends. And actually, Scott Teal of Crowbar Press ended up doing a kind of an updated version of the book that he and Steve Yohe had put notes together on, and they made corrections on some of the errors that the author had written. And it's just a really profound book that people still talk about today in the business. And I just wanted to put it on this list because, I mean, if Jim Cornette and Brian Last are still talking about it, it is definitely a very important wrestling book, probably unlike any other.
All right. I'm going to start with a kind of a jovial pick, which was my number 10.
Let's hear it.
One of my best friends in the business. Is Wrestling Fixed? I Didn't Know It Was Broken by Bill Apter.
Classic. And it's on my shelf.
Yes, it came out, about 8 or 9 years ago at this point, or maybe even 10 years ago, and it was like going back to the office.
Yeah, right.
As I read the book, I could actually hear Bill's voice saying all the words that were in it. There's a lot of great photos in it. Bill remains the most upbeat guy. He is turning 80 this year, and it's just personal for me. He mentions me kindly in the book, and to me, that meant the world to me. And because those 7 years or whatever I spent with PWI were such a major part of it, it just never lets me go. It never lets me go. So as a book, as great literature, no, it's not, but it's fun as hell, and I think sometimes you want to read a book that's upbeat, and it does have a few things that Bill remembered that weren't exactly the greatest times in his life, the problems to the job and stuff like that and other things. But I think overall, I love the title. I love Bill. Love the book.
One thing I have to say about that book is it really answered a lot of those questions that, like, people who had dreamt of, my God, if I only meet Bill Apter one day, I got to ask him this. Those types of questions are answered in the book. And he talks about the publisher, who oftentimes people ask about, that gentleman that ran the publishing end of it, and the problems that he had with WWF, with Vince Sr. back in the day, problems with Vince Jr. And the thing that's really neat about that book is that it's just a compilation of stories. I mean, every 2 pages, he has another topic or another subject, and he details it nicely, and you move on to something else. So it's like at least 100 stories in that book of his life and the escapades of running the top wrestling magazines.
Yeah. And he's still working to this day.
He's awesome. Amazing.
All right. You got another one for me there, sir?
All right. Now, this book is another really deep cut here. And I think on one of your programs, Brian Solomon was on, and he mentioned this book. This is going back to 1988. And the book was called Drawing Heat by Jim Friedman. And this is the book that talked about Dave McKigney, the Bear Man, and his promotion. And it talked about the Sheik wrestling for the Bear Man in those dying days. And I know Brian had mentioned that this Jim Friedman is an academic guy. He's a professor emeritus at a college, I believe, in Canada. And it's like the only wrestling book written by academians. So it's really profound in that regard and unique in that regard. And the subject matter, is really off the beaten path promotion, the Bear Man's promotion in Canada and working small towns. And the Sheik in the early 1980s, after his great Detroit promotion is kind of burned to the ground. He's working for them. Great stories, unique perspective, and it's got to be on the list of all-time great wrestling books.
Now, I don't know how to handle this, so I'm just going to handle it. All right.
Okay.
That's my number 2.
Holy cow, great.
That's my number 2, and I'll tell you what, I had just started at PWI when I got the book.
Okay.
I mail ordered it from some. No, I didn't.
How'd you get it?
I had a used copy from another staffer, I think. And
Okay.
he let me borrow the book,
Mm-hmm.
and I read it about 4 times. And here's the most amazing thing about that book. When you think about the era, he got literal quotes from the Sheik out of character. Nobody had ever done that before, ever.
Oh my God.
How he got to, Ed Farhat to talk as Ed Farhat is a mystery to this day that I don't know how he got him that comfortable, but, let's hear it for Jim Friedman because it was like, good gravy. I mean, that was a big thing for me. And it's the first insider wrestling book, really, full of great stars and great anecdotes. It's a serious fan should really read it. I think it's at Crowbar Press right now that you mentioned.
It is.
And like I said, I read it in 1988 at the office during my
Really?
lunch breaks.
Really?
Yeah, during my lunch breaks for about a week, I read that book, and I'll never forget it because to me, it was the first super serious wrestling book that I could remember. I'm probably wrong about that, and I'm not talking about the historical books. I'm just talking about an insider book for
Yeah.
the first time. I can't think of one that preceded it. I just can't.
It's amazing to think that that's the year that it came out was the same year that, Adonis and the Kelly twins got killed working for the Bear Man, I believe, on one of those tours. And so tragic and another historical moment in wrestling history. But that impresses me that you had the book and you were reading it as you're publishing Pro Wrestling Illustrated. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so so I'll let you do your next book because I'm gonna skip to number 9. It doesn't matter if we go in chronology. We'll
Well,
just say what they
I
are.
want to hear your number 9 though.
You wanna hear my number 9? Okay,
Please.
it was another snarky, sort of trying to get inside book from 1974.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever Happened to Gorgeous George by
Joe
Joe
Jarris.
Jarris, right.
Yes.
I read this in a college library back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't my college.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if it was my girlfriend's college. I've never owned a copy of it. Again, it was like a thing I would go back to. I never took the book out of the library, but I would go back and remember where it was, in the shelving, and I would take it, read it gradually. And
Well, you're not going to believe this. Now, my number 9 was your number 2, and actually the Joe Jarris book, Whatever Happened to Gorgeous George, is my number 2 on the
okay,
list.
all right. So go ahead, talk.
And the reason why, I became a wrestling fan in 1976. I go to my public library, which I could, walk to from my home, and there's this book by Joe Jarris, and I got it and I read it, and it was so much fun, and it actually apparently got voted on years later by Sports Illustrated as one of the great sports books of the 20th century. It actually made the list. And but he was a former SI writer, Joe Jarris, and his father was a pro wrestler apparently in the 1950s, and that's what inspired him to write the book. And the guys at Crowbar Press, Scott Teal again, he's not only published a updated version of the book, but it has tons of added pictures. It has updates on the author, and it's only 1995, so I would highly recommend it to anybody out there. And it will always remain my nostalgic pick of my favorite wrestling book, just because it came out in 74, and I discovered it as a young fan in 1976. So.
Very good. I'm glad you were a fan of that book as much as I was, because it's like, again, those were the early ones, the ones that you read when you were still entering adulthood. Really, I think I was about 16 or 17 when I read that book.
It was a fun book, and it just had it really captured the essence of wrestling, the fun, the grandeur, the larger than life. I mean, it's just a magnificent book in that regard. So I'll give you my number 8 here. I know that the author is on your list somewhere, but I've got Keith Elliott Greenberg, who's another prolific pro wrestling author. But I've got him down here for a different book than the one I think you got him down for. One of the books he put out was a book called Tangled Ropes, which came out in 2006, which was the biography of superstar Billy Graham. And for Keith Elliott Greenberg to put together a book that was truthful and encapsulated the incredibly interesting and bizarre and unique life of superstar Billy Graham, and to capture it, it was quite a feat. And he pulled that off magnificently. And it's one of the best books out there on one of the greatest and most unique wrestlers of all time.
I have a Keith Elliott Greenberg book on my list as well, but it's not the one you're thinking it is. So there.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. You
All right.
really got me guessing now. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Well, what's your number 8, Bob?
My number 8 was a tie. And I do this because I was a fan too. And I love photography.
Okay.
And both of these books are mainly photography.
I want to hear about it.
The first one was actually a Wrestling Observer Book of the year it came out, from 2009, the Midnight Express's 25th anniversary scrapbook.
Jim Cornette's book.
Jim Cornette's book, right? I mean, how could you not love that? And it's in a tie with me for 3 years ago, Joyce Postian.
Yeah.
My ringside seat to the AWA. A heartfelt story, and the writing is good too. A heartfelt story of a fan who became an insider by accident, and photos that have never been seen before of a federation where you can't get photos new anywhere.
Right.
So I just found it to be a great piece of work, just fun. I mean, you saw every major AWA star from, Wilbur Snyder to Hulk Hogan in that book. So I just thought it was a lot of fun. Joyce had a lot of wonderful anecdotes. And Jim Cornette, what can I say? And the Midnight Express.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I don't know if the Midnight Express book is still in print. I really don't.
I don't think it is.
And for Joyce's book, I just go to Joyce, type in her name, Joyce Postian, in your browser, and she has a website now, and you can order it directly from her.
Yeah, I haven't seen that book, but I remember when you covered it. I remember you had her on. I've heard her on other podcasts. She was on with George Shire as well, and she developed great friendships with guys like Nick Bockwinkel and Lord Alfred Hayes. People I really like, and those anecdotes are in the book amongst the great photos. And like you say, she had those photos at home all those years for decades, and now you're seeing brand new photos of AWA guys.
Who else is going to describe Bobby Heenan as, quote, really shy?
Right. That's a first.
I mean, when you bring it, he was kind of afraid of people.
I've never heard that.
Well, mainly, no. Let me explain. What did he do for a living?
Pro wrestling.
And back in the day, the most nefarious heels were constantly threatened physically.
Right.
So he had a right to be a little bit shy, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's what she meant by that.
Okay.
He found it hard to trust regular people because he didn't know which side they were on, or if they understood what they were looking at.
Right.
So that's why she said he was really like sheepish around people. And I think that makes sense. When he was around his element, he was like a life of a party, as we all know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, again, are these like super literature? No. Are they great books? Yeah. I had a blast reading them, and I have them in my collection. I love them. So what can I tell you?
Well, it's like anything else. I mean, you have Joyce's book. It's like an AWA scrapbook. You can open it up. You can go through the photos, and it takes you back to the 70s or 80s, and you're there. So it's very worthwhile. So, all right, I'll take you to my number 7, which is one of my all-time favorite wrestling books. It was simply called Backlund by Bob Backlund, and he had a guy helping him write the book, Robert Miller, who I believe is an attorney in the East Coast. And this book is so well done and so meticulous, and it covers Bob Backlund entering the pro wrestling scene and learning the business, and it meticulously covers the years that he was the WWF champion. And he has chapters devoted to each of his championship years, talks about all of his opponents in depth. How did they get picked? How many matches did they have at the Garden? How he felt about them? What wrestlers were kind of snug to work with and difficult to work with. And I mean, I've never read a book before or since that was so detailed and so intimate like that from a guy who was really one of the very top guys in the entire profession during his 6 years, near 6 years on the top of the card. So I have to recommend that book to you.
That's new to me.
You got to get it.
I know of the book. I have not read that book.
It's tremendous.
Wow, that's quite the endorsement there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to have a trend in my next two. We're to number 7 now, and it's a book that I recently talked about in the show a couple years ago, I guess. The Kern Chronicles Volume 2 by Steve Kern and Ian Douglas.
Okay.
Knocked my socks off. The first volume was startling enough as it was. The second volume turned Steve Kern from one of the top wrestlers in his field to a semi-troubled, kind of desperate human being.
Okay.
In that he actually left wrestling for a good amount of time.
Mm.
He was forced to do it. He actually got jobs. And written in brutal honesty, but still with a good sense of humor and a lot of humanity. Ian brings out the real Steve Kern as if you were talking to him face to face, which I have done. And talking to Steve Kern face to face is an experience. And
Wow.
got to tell you, the book, I go back and look at, chapters in it now, and it's almost as if I remember the day when I did the video podcast with him. It was just, it's a wonderful book. And I would recommend both volumes, but for me, the second volume, where Steve's life took a turn in quite unexpected ways, well worth checking out. He talks about, the later stuff he did, the Skinner period, which
Right.
actually he enjoyed more than you would think he enjoyed for reasons I won't tell you if you haven't read the book.
Okay.
And a million other things. And his influence on young wrestlers today, it's just, he's a legend. He should be in every Hall of Fame there is. But until then, check these books out. Both of the Kern Chronicles Volume 1 and 2 by Steve Kern and Ian Douglas.
Yeah, it just shows you what a small world it is. Some of the people listening to this show may have seen a picture I shared of myself and Al Perez, former Florida wrestling star, here at a gym locally. And at that same gym, Steve Kern works out, and he's worked out alongside me many a time. And I never wanted to interrupt him and say, "Hey, by the way, I'm a big fan of wrestling and blah, blah, blah." And he just always looked like somebody that was just enjoying his workout. And I didn't want to bother him. But it is a very small world when you think about it.
Off topic, I once worked out at staying in Lex Luger's gym in the Atlanta area.
Really? Wow.
I felt like a child in there.
Okay.
I was surrounded by the biggest, brawniest, most muscle-bound guys I've ever seen, and women who were so fit you couldn't believe it. And I walk in there with a friend, and we worked out, and I was like, and I hadn't been working out, but I had workout clothes with me, and I worked out. And you know what was cool about it? Nobody said, "Hey, you runt," or anything.
Yeah, right.
People just say, use a machine. Yeah, I'll use it now. And it was like a normal situation, but I saw some of the most incredible physiques I have ever seen on human beings in my whole life. This was obviously a place where all the local athletes came to get their workouts in. And holy smokes.
Right.
So I can say that one of my wrestling experiences, although they weren't there, was working out in Sting and Lex Luger's gym.
That's very cool. Very cool. So I'm going to give you my number 6 here. We had the good pleasure of having this gentleman on our podcast, Frank Culbertson. Now, Frank didn't write the book. His good friend Mike Rogers did. But there's a book called Katie Bar the Door by Mike Rogers. Mike Rogers used to put out this excellent newsletter called Ring Around the Northwest, which was one of the all-time great newsletters, and it covered the Portland territory, the very famous Portland territory. And the book is magnificent. I mean, it covers the entire history of the promotion, and I think the promotion started around 1960, and I think it ended in the early 90s. But every year they have a chapter for every year. They have pictures of every star that came through the territories. And there's so many big names that came through from different time periods. I mean, you could just about name anybody. I mean, a lot of people know Jimmy Snuka got his major start there. and he came back years later. But they always had a great roster of talent there, and they were always an interesting promotion. And I thought that book was really well done and fascinating, and it made it to my number 6 position on my list.
I am quite interested because I've never heard of it.
It's outstanding. I mean, tons of pictures, just great text, very informative, tells you where the guys are today, if they're still around, tells you about, them going to other promotions. I mean, very insightful book.
Is this Amazonian fodder or is it still in print?
It's still in print, and it is. You can get it on Amazon. Look for Mike Rogers, the author, on Amazon, and the book is called Katie Bar the Door. And they have a couple other great books. There's one on the Hawaiian promotion, and there's also an encyclopedia of Portland wrestlers that has every guy who ever came to the promotion. They're all good, and I love them all, but this is probably my favorite of those 3 books, Katie Bar the Door.
Wow. News to me. I love this. Now, number 6 for me is something I just finished.
Let's hear it.
It's 3 or 4 years old now, but it's from 2022. It's Bahamian Rhapsody by Ian Douglas.
Oh,
Talking
yes.
about the promotions from the Bahamas that nobody else covered in any way ever. And it's like opening your eyes. Like I talk about the World Wrestling Association out of Indianapolis when they were Brewers for Bedlam and nobody ever saw it.
Sure.
This is very similar. There was so much going on in the Bahamas that it's a fascinating story. Ian's got the touch as a writer. He's a really good writer. I mean, he could write anything. And like I say, because he chooses to write about wrestling, it's a gift to all of us because this guy could write. He could write anything. And he's got style and syntax and prose, and it's just beautiful. And I learned a lot. And of course, our friend Howard Baum gets quoted because him and his dad ran the promotion there for a short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian has a way of making things serious yet accessible in his writing style. I hope he takes that as a compliment because a lot of the serious writers out there tend to be drier than Zwieback toast.
Right.
But Ian's not like that. There's humanity in his seriousness. He knows when to turn it around and make things a little lighter when he has to in terms of what's going on, what he's writing about. I don't know how to put it other than, boy, what an ace of a writer he is. And this is a story you probably have never read before. Learn about Tyree Pride, Kevin Sullivan, all the stars that went there. I mean, it's one of wrestling's best kept secrets, and I don't want it to be one of wrestling's best kept books. So check out Bahamian Rhapsody. What a great title.
Oh, very unique. And in the other book that he recently put out about the history of Black wrestlers, I mean, that's such a great reference book and out there. I mean, that deserves to be mentioned too. I mean, this guy is so prolific with his output. My God,
he's had 2 books out this year.
Yeah,
and that was one of them. And then the earlier books. So it's like, wow, what a year he's having. But his reputation is gaining by leaps and bounds. He's self-published, but you never know it because of the graphics and editing are first rate. Is Oliver Lee Bateman. I have to give him credit as his editor of the last couple of books. Has done a stellar job. There's nothing better than having a good editor. Trust me. I've been somebody else's editor, and I've been edited by somebody else. And I insist that if you're a good writer, you'll find yourself a good editor. You will miss things, my friends. If you ever want to write a book, you guys out there, you'll miss stuff. You need somebody to collaborate with it because it makes things so much easier.
Absolutely.
All right, number 5 for you?
Number 5, this is a book that I think you've heard of, and you may have, and it's always been, for us wrestling fans, we go on the Facebook a lot, and one of those common questions you see every month or so, oh, what's your favorite wrestling book? And this is one of my 2 stock answers that I usually give. And this one is Wrestlers Are Like Seagulls by J.J. Dillon. Have you ever read that one, Bob?
I remember when it came out. I have not read it.
I highly recommend it, and I think what makes it so unique, in my opinion, is this is a guy who began as a fan, then became a referee, then decided to become a worker, then became a manager along the way, and then eventually gets to be like the assistant booker to Dusty in Florida, and then eventually becomes one of Vince's right-hand mans, and then goes to WCW and is the figurehead president, and then he's a behind-the-scenes producer or important person behind the scenes on the booking committee, and then he's out of wrestling. But that whole entire journey from fan to executive is in the book, and there's tons of pictures, tons of great stories. And I will say this: I think that the wonderful thing called the shoot interview, I think people don't, they kind of laugh it off. They say, oh, shoot interviews are crap or whatever, but some of them have been so wonderful and so good. If anybody has a chance to see the J.J. Dillon shoot interview that RF Video put out, I think this is one from the early 2000s. This may have been around the time the book came out. JJ was so animated. He was talking about being a wrestler, I think, in Amarillo, and he was doing this great promotion, this great feud with Killer Carl Cox, and they were going to have a match, and one of the loser of the match was going to get stuffed in this huge industrial-sized garbage can, and in the way he was telling the story, you knew it was going to be him because he was the chicken shit heel, and he was going to get shoved in the garbage can, and it turned out it was Killer Carl Cox got shoved in, and he got all the drip from the chewing tobacco on his head and his bald head, and he just told these great stories. And I would say get the shoot interview, get the book, enjoy them together, and you'll be, if you're not a huge fan of J. Dillon, you will become a huge J.J. Dillon fan.
Very interesting stuff there. Really great. Listen. I still can't get over the video that floats around now because I guess it's pretty much public domain of a 1969 match from Detroit with the California Hells Angels, one of which is Chris Cole.
Right.
Against a cowboy hat wearing James J. Dillon and Arnold Skolin.
Yes, classic.
I fall on the floor every time they introduce that one, and I'm like, wow.
I love that.
Because I think James kind of started in Detroit. I could be wrong about that. But all I know, they were both younger. If you can imagine a young James J. Dillon, that is. And Arnold Skolin always looked 47. So that's just the way it works.
It was just so great. I love that match you're talking about. I think that they actually filmed that like in a garage. They had those balloons or things that you would normally see around a car wash, those little bordery type things, yellow, and they look like shiny pennants, yellow and red. But anyhow, yeah, J.J. Dillon is just so good. And to answer your question, in the book they cover this. He was a WWF referee in the early 60s, and Bruno had helped him a bit, and Bruno had helped him like get a payoff when he kind of juiced during an angle. He kind of went above and beyond it as a very important angle, and Bruno went to bat for him. And when Bruno found out he wanted to get into the business, he told him to come down to Pittsburgh. I'll let you in, and he did. He helped him get some matches in Pittsburgh, and you're absolutely right. They sent him to the Sheik. The Sheik had some spots for him, and he did do some work there. And somehow, through another wrestler that was there, maybe Jim Grabmeyer or somebody, he ended up going to the Carolinas for Big Jim Crockett, Jim Crockett's father, and they got him going in the Carolinas, and he's became a regular in the Carolinas for a while after that, around 71 or so.
Dillon was here, there, and everywhere.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was everywhere. If you look at the movements of his career, he was every place. So
Every territory.
yeah. All right. Now my number 5
Please.
is a Keith Elliott Greenberg book.
Okay.
Can you guess? You know who I am. It's not the new one, although I love Bigger, Better, Better, which is one of the better books of this year.
But
It's
if
not.
it's not that, then I'll say the Blassie book.
Doggone right, you pencil neck geek. Listen, you pencil neck geeks is, look, Fred Blassie, the manager, I can take or leave. Seriously, he was all right. Fred Blassie, the wrestler, oh my God.
King of Men.
Listen, how old was I in 72? 12, 13? I've never been so terrified watching a televised wrestling match as him when he returned to the WWF as his Pacific Coast Heavyweight Champion and proceeded to gnaw Big Jim Lancaster's face into bloody shards right in lurid close-up on television. And I am telling you, I'm fascinated. How did he do it? How did they do that? What mindset is this? Blassie's I wish there was more tape, and I know there's more tape of Blassie in
I
their
do know
archives
there
at the
is.
WWF, but in any event, this is the next best thing. Great photos, great tales of the feud against John Tolis, all that stuff, and of course, into the managerial career as well, and everything he did in the WWF and his relationship with the McMahons, everything. It's all there. Pretty candid. As a Blassie geek, it had to be on the list. Is this great literature? No. Is it the real words of Blassie? You bet they are. I don't think they soft soaped anything in this book. And there's a lot of memories, a lot of things about his career you may have never known. Like, did you know that he was so hurt at one point in his career he had to stop working in Atlanta? He was selling cars,
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So listen, you pencil neck geeks, read this book. It is still in print. I find that very, very delightful.
That's awesome, and I should be ashamed of myself as one of the all-time big WWF fans. I should have that on my shelf. I don't. I actually have a Jeff Walton book on what was that sign that they'd have there in California, Richfield 34691 or whatever. But
yeah.
It's that book that talks about the California promotion, and Blassie is heavily featured in the book, so that's a good one too. But yeah, your book is a great call. And again, Keith Elliott Greenberg is one of those phenomenal, prolific writers who gives you so much more than you're expecting out of any normal wrestling book.
It amazed me too at the time when Keith worked for the WWF company that his books were, how should I say this? His books were not
Censored?
stilted. They weren't stilted. Yeah, they weren't stilted or censored, or they weren't like, I guess, home books. It's like it wasn't a house organ. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
You got personal anecdotes from wrestlers you really wouldn't expect from anybody in the WWF at the time when they were published.
Right.
Because they were like kids' fare at that point. Matilda the Bulldog and all those things.
Right.
So the fact that the books that Keith came up with were actual books, hats off, because it's like, again, this was the first time a lot of the WWF superstars ever, spoke about real things, because they certainly did do it on television.
All I can imagine is, Vince looked at Blassie kind of like his father in a way, like a substitute father. I mean, they apparently he thought like Blassie did. They had the same interest. They're both kind of pervy old guys, and I could see why Vince would want to have Blassie's story as authentically told as possible.
I will say this, folks. There are very few people walking around there who actually had an opportunity to see Wild Manfred Blassie in his prime. Now, I saw him at the tail end of his prime.
Right.
I have never seen a more vicious visage in my whole life. He was absolutely off the rails.
Right.
I think he was scarier than the Sheik or any of these other heels. I think the scariest of all was Blassie because he acted like a complete madman when the bell rang. It was, and even he did a promo once in Albany where he broke a wooden chair over his own head.
Oh my God!
And it was real. I'm telling you, it wasn't worked. He picked that bang, and he's going, and he's screaming, and he's breaking the chair over his head because he had a match against Strongbow coming up in Albany.
Right.
And this was a B-Town promo.
Right.
So there was nobody like Blassie. Nobody generated more heat. And he paid the price for that too. He got attacked by fans and all that other stuff. You'll read all that in the book. But I will say nobody ever like Blassie. To me, I always looked at the Sheik and Blassie as 1 and 1A in terms of, the great scary heels of the 60s and 70s. But I put Blassie just a eyelash above the Sheik. They're just in my heart because I saw more of Blassie.
Well, in Blassie, I mean, we've seen it all in the last 30, 40, 50 years or so. I mean, who had a better personality than Blassie? I mean, larger than life, so irascible and kind of like a William Demarest all the time, upset, ornery. I mean, you gotta love the guy.
And he told bad jokes during promos, like at ringside with Spiros Arian. We were in the Atlantic Ocean yesterday. We saw a shark going by. That wasn't a joke. It was just Dominic DeNucci floating upwards. Ha, 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 ha. It was just, it was, a big nose. It's just, the jokes were terrible. That's why they were funny.
Yeah. He was hilarious.
He was really funny. And listen, I liked Blassie, the manager. Don't get me wrong. I liked him as long as he was around. And they all went away just one by one. Blassie, Albano, and the Grand Wizard. Poop, poop, poop. I think the Wizard was first.
He passed away
Blassie
in
was
83.
second, and I think Albano was the last one out the door. So
Yeah.
That mid-'80s thing took them all away. So anyway, give me another book, sir.
And number 4, this is one that I would say that most anyone who considers himself a serious wrestling historian most likely has this on their bookshelf. This was a real game changer. This is from another extremely prolific author, Tim Hornbaker, and the book is called The National Wrestling Alliance: The Untold Story of the Monopoly that something wrestling that ran wrestling, I guess. But it's just a huge book that talks about the history of the NWA when it was kind of considered a monopoly, and it talks about the promoter in St. Louis, Sam Mushnick, and all the champions and how they decided on who would be the champions and the history right up until Ric Flair and beyond. And it's just a remarkable book discussing the largest ongoing body in wrestling, which was the NWA, and it does mention the AWA and the WWF and WWF in there to a degree as well, since they're all had to coexist together. So it's just a remarkable book. Tells a lot of the behind the scenes stories that you never knew, and it's on most people's shelves, I would say.
You're probably right about it, or at least one Tim Hornbaker book.
Yes, yeah, he's had some other really good ones. I know that.
Yeah, I have 2 of them myself, and it's like, I'll tell you what, he is the master of minutia.
Yes,
he is the king of detail. I mean, for the real nuts and bolts, Tim Hornbaker every time, every book. Am I right about that? You agree with that?
Oh yeah, and he was recently honored, I believe, at the Hall of Fame in Iowa. He got their historian award or whatever they give to the top writers in the field, and he got that award, well deserved, because each one of his books has been really well received and extremely well researched, and every fan that gets those books, they're never disappointed. They're so happy to have them on their shelf.
Absolutely right. And his books sell like crazy too.
They do.
They're always in the Amazon top sellers when they're released. So and rightfully so. He's earned his spot for sure. Go to number 4.
Please.
He's the one who made your honorable mention. Have a Nice Day. A Tale of Blood and Sweat Socks by Mick Foley, way back in the year 2000. Look, there is a handful of people in the wrestling business that I could say he's a friend of mine. I mean, on a personal level. There's probably 10 or 15, I would say. Mick Foley's one of them. And reading that book was like hearing him talk. And it reminded me of one day when John Arizzi, myself, and Mick were going to a card, and I think in New Jersey somewhere, an independent show. And Mick would rattle off tales, and we would all talk about stuff we've seen. And reading that book felt like those conversations to me. Right. I could hear his voice reading the words. It's just totally authentic. And the struggle, let me tell you, Mick Foley is, say what you want about his daring do. The things he did in the ring and outside the ring, the daring stuff he did, the giant falls, falling off the cage, the elbow drop off of the ring apron onto the floor, which ruined his hip and all that other stuff.
Sure.
That's one thing. But the fact is, he was not going to say no to a wrestling career. No matter, the promoters would say, you ain't got big enough muscles. Well, you know what? He just forged his way in there and became probably a top 10 superstar and the WWE Hall of Famer. So nobody worked harder. I saw that in him when he was young, and proud of the guy. I still remain very, very proud of Mick Foley. I think he took a lot of unnecessary risks in a lot of those matches, and he's even admitting, should I have done this in his older age? But I will say that the book reveals him, and that is the sound of his voice, folks. Now, he did other books too, but to me, the Have a Nice Day one was always going to be my favorite, because it's just, he got bold, wrote a book, got a bestseller, went to number 1 in the New
Yeah.
York Times, and started a whole new trend. So it's a trend-setting book, and from, by the way, a really cool human being.
Oh yeah, yeah, and he did everything his own way. He didn't compromise. He made himself like this beloved, organic wrestling character that no one ever seen anything like that before. I mean, he was so like an average Joe, but he tried his hardest. He gave his, left his heart and soul in the ring, and I think people related to that. I mean, they could tell he wasn't the best body or the best this or the best that, but he gave them the best performance of the card, and people it resonated with people as they're paying their hard-earned dollar to go to the matches, and he was the one that was providing the satisfaction on those shows.
Yep. Trivia, he invited me to his wedding, but I couldn't go. You know why? My brother was
Why?
getting married.
Oh my gosh.
Of all days, he had to pick the day my brother got married. So I
Yeah.
don't know what to say other than, those are the days.
Yeah.
All right, we're up to number 3.
Yes, number 3. So we're going to go to somebody who's become a friend of mine just through the podcast we've been on together, and I know he's a real friend of yours because you've been able to hang out together. Brian Solomon, the author of Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real story of wrestling's original Sheik at Farhat. That book came out in 2022, just 3 years ago, and to me, that was one of the all-time great books. It's my number 3 position. Not only is it so researched and detailed, and it just provides so much information about one of the biggest enigmas in wrestling history, the Sheik, the original Sheik, who was the most kayfabe wrestler of all time, as far as somebody who wanted to reveal the least about himself compared to other wrestlers who eventually, revealed certain things about themselves. But the book is so great. It just is so detailed. It talks about how he, was a kid and had difficulties and became a wrestler, not a star, but just a wrestler. And then with his ambition and his work ethic, started to move up on the card, got good advice from Vince Sr., eventually becomes an owner in the promotion. And the promotion, eventually in the late 60s becomes like the number 1 promotion in the North America, and has, a number of great years. And then there's a downward spiral after that. So it's just a remarkable story on all fronts. And I know it's one of your favorites as well.
It's my number 1 on this list,
Okay.
and
Okay.
there's a lot of reasons for that. Number 1, it's the greatest final paragraphs in the history of wrestling books in my eyes, and I'm not gonna tell you why. I'm just gonna say the last few words of that book really moved me, and I think that it really hit me in the feels, as the kids say, and I urge everybody to read it just for that. But I will say other things. If you wanna learn about the doings of 1960s and 70s territories, this is the book.
Right.
It actually goes off in little tangents about what was going on in the surrounding territories to Detroit
Yeah.
and Toronto and the World Wrestling Federation and the NWA and the Crockett Promoter. Everybody's in there,
Yes.
and because it all is part of the Sheik's pie, he was here and there and everywhere. I just think it answered things. Even though I've been in and out of the business for 40 years or whatever it is, I learned so much from this book, and I
Right.
didn't think there was all that much I could learn. I was like, "I didn't know that. I didn't know this. I didn't know that."
Right.
And the intimate look into the mindset of the Sheik was also equally as engrossing for me. It just I told Brian when I met him originally, "This is the book I've always wanted to read."
Right.
And the fact that he did it so many years after the Sheik's death is almost a miracle that he was able to compile all this information. So
Right.
for me, for a guy who is fascinated by the most violent bad guys, I found this to be, in my eyes, it's gonna take a hell of a book to top that one. I
Right.
just for me, okay?
Right.
Everybody can have their own opinion, but from
Sure.
where I'm coming from, the mystery, I miss going to wrestling and going, "How did they do that? How
Right.
could he bleed that hard? How did they cut him open? Is he hurt? Is he not hurt?"
Mhm.
My God, look at how high that drop kick was. How did he
Right.
not take his head off with that?
Right,
I used to
right,
love thinking that way when the bright lights were on in an arena, and
right.
I never wanna lose that. I never wanna lose it, and that book brought it back to me.
That's
So,
awesome.
Blood and Fire: The Unbelievable Real Life Story of Wrestling's Original Sheik, obviously still in print,
Yes.
and
Yes.
masterwork, masterpiece, absolutely stunning.
Well, that's great to hear that. So that was my number 3. What was your number 3?
It's the other one, the new one.
Oh, okay, alright.
Irresistible Force: The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon, published just, like, 3 days ago
Yes.
by Brian Solomon and Brian R. Solomon, don't let me get that wrong, and this one is, if the Sheik book is, like, my favorite book, the next 2, The Drawing Heat and The Irresistible Force, are, like, just slightly underneath it. It's like when you take the stuff off the pudding.
Right.
You ever mom ever make you pudding and had to take that scummy stuff
The
off the
film.
top?
The
The
film,
film,
yeah.
yeah. Well, this is what's right underneath the chocolate part on the top. So,
Okay.
but, no, a book about Gorilla Monsoon, why hasn't anybody ever thought of it?
I know. I know.
Seriously. I
Spe
mean,
spe especially
who
since they put out all the books, WWE, and he was one of their beloved insiders who never turned on them, so it's like
yeah, but, he was the guy that everybody liked, was very influential all around the world. I mean, in other promotions in, like, Puerto Rico and
yeah.
everywhere he traveled, he was a big part of the office, and a lot of people didn't realize that even when he was working.
Mhm.
He worked until 1980, 81 or something like that. He was always part of the office, and then,
Yeah.
of course, his On Air, which most people know him from, and he got really good at that, and he was really entertaining. The duel with Heenan on Primetime Wrestling is classic stuff.
Yes.
Nobody turned in to see, Paul Roma against Terry Taylor. They were there to hear Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon go at it for sure.
That's right. That was the
Um
entertainment.
and this book, it's just come out. I don't wanna reveal too much about it. I was lucky enough, he was nice enough to get me a galley of it before it was literally published,
Right.
and as we record this coming Sunday, I'm going to go to a book event where he's gonna appear to debut his new book. He's doing these all around the East Coast, I guess, and I'm gonna go to one in Connecticut because gives you a chance to say hi to him and, get a physical copy of Irresistible Force: The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon, one of the most interesting, multifaceted personalities in the history of anything.
Well, not to steal your thunder, I know you had the book at number 3. The book is actually my number 1 book now.
Really?
Yeah, I finished reading it maybe a week ago, I guess. I finished reading it, and what I like most about it, and like you said, Bob, we're not gonna spoil the book for anybody, but just to sum up in a brief way, what I liked a lot about it was not only did it tell the story of Gorilla Monsoon, this wonderful guy, Robert Morella or Bob Morella or Gino, a great family man and a great amateur wrestler. Not only does it tell his story, but it tells the story of a young Gino, a young Bruno Sammartino, a young Vince McMahon, and how they all grew up in the wrestling business together. They all kind of go in their own directions with their careers. And at the end of the book, Brian ties it in all so nicely. And there's a wonderful final chapter where it's like, okay, we've told the story. Now here's where they are now. Like here's where they all ended up. It talks about Bruno reconciling with the WWE. It talks about Gino and his family, how they're doing, and it's just such a wonderful book. It tells not just his personal story, but the story of the promotion. How WWF went from this East Coast thing that was run like the mafia to now being this global, thing you can buy on the stock market that's, a very valuable investment now and all this. So it's really a great book. I can't recommend it enough. It's huge. It's the size of a phone book and it's got great pictures as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
highly recommended.
Yeah, that's the best thing, I've neglected to mention that, and in many of these books, there are sometimes never before seen photographs in a lot of these books, so you wanna check
Yeah.
those out.
Yeah, he personally chose those photos, and there a lot of them I've never seen before, so that's really cool that he could find some really rare photos.
Yes, absolutely. Now, do you have a number 2? Did you get to your number 2, or are we done? I think that would be the last book. Your
My
number 2,
number
right?
2 was the Gorgeous George book, but what was your number 2?
That was The Drawing Heat.
All right, and my number 1 was Gino's Monsoon's book, and what was your number 1?
Oh, Blood and Fire with the Sheik.
Oh, there we go. We covered
With the
it.
Sheik. Yeah, we covered it
Yeah.
all. Yes, yeah, so there's the thing, we jumped around because, as I say about professional wrestlers themselves, there is no best.
Yes.
It's what's best to you, the thing you enjoy the most. I'm like a cross when it comes to wrestling books with me. I like a cross between historic information, title changes, and I like that as much as anybody to read the stats, go down a list type of thing. But I also like personal anecdotes, what it was like for wrestlers on the road, how hard it was, how physically it hurt them. There's one book, and I cannot remember what it was, where I read an anecdote from a preliminary wrestler. He's like, every day in my life, my body hurt. And every day I said, why am I doing this? I'm going to pitch my boots in the trash. And then later on, he became a champion somewhere. And he's like, it was all worth it then.
Right, right.
What I worry about is that today's young wrestlers take the championships too seriously as in
Okay.
terms of professional achievement.
Right.
And I even worry worse that a lot of other there's a new thought amongst the new breed of wrestlers who are coming up the ranks is that they want to be TV stars, not
Right.
wrestlers particularly.
Right. Crossover stars.
No, it should be the other way around. You should want to
Right.
be a wrestler if you're going into professional. You agree with that or no?
I would just like to hear a wrestler want to focus on psychology and know how to tell the story in the ring. That's what I would like.
Yeah, I miss that too. Boy, do I miss that. Yeah. But anyway, no, there are many more great books. I remember Main Event by Roberta Morgan, I think her name
Yes, I
was.
do. Yes, I
That
do.
big it was really just a big puff piece for the WW Worldwide Wrestling Federation at the time. But there were no wrestling books out back then. What was that, 1980 or so?
It was
77?
1978. I
78,
remember walking
okay.
into the bookstore up the street from my dad's flower shop. I see that like they had a big wall of sports books, and there it is in the center, this gleaming, shiny, soft cover book with Backlund and Superstar wrestling at the Spectrum on the cover. And like my mouth is watering, and I think I told my mom, "Mom, we gotta get this book."
Mhm,
And I think, but being that my mom was this wonderful woman, she brought it home and we got the book, and it had a color centerfold filled with pictures
mhm.
of Bruno and Backlund and Patera and all the big stars, and it was really great. And I mean, for what it was a really nice book, a kayfabe book of all the top stars of that era.
Yes, and it did have multiple misspellings and errors. Who who cared? There were no wrestling books back then, right?
Yeah, I mean,
We were
they
both kids, right? We
she
were
she
essentially kids.
I think she had a relationship somehow with, like, ring wrestling too, because they had a story about a battle royal maybe at the Boston Garden, and she lifted, like, the whole article that was about, like, who got dumped out of the battle royal at this point or whatever, and so, but it was a fun book. It was just a great book. Anybody could enjoy it, and another book that we didn't mention it, but it's another classic, is Bret Hart's book, which was a lot
Right.
like Mick Foley's,
Mhm.
just a huge, huge phone book sized book talking about his entire career, and like Mick Foley, he was really good, telling his story in his own voice, and he really described a lot of the wild times on the road and the weird stuff that was going on, and of course all the weird personalities in wrestling. So it was another very unforgettable book.
Yep, I agree with that. I really do. Books, a nice adjunct to our professional wrestling fandom, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
my wife sometimes will see me watching the Marius of old. They'll be watching a match between beautiful Bruce Swayze and somebody on the IWA. And then I turn the light out and I lift up a wrestling book and she goes, "Do you ever stop?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, not tonight."
Right.
But no, in any event, no, it's like as I age, I'm very nostalgic, man. That's why I started the podcast. I'm just nostalgic. And I want to impart that feeling of really loving this stuff when I was anywhere between 12 and 20. It's like it felt different back then, felt important. I bought a VCR because of wrestling. It's like it felt so important to me, and I couldn't even tell you why. Like I said, when I was a child, I argued with my parents because wrestling was on Sundays at 11 o'clock.
Right.
I didn't want to see it. I felt I had to see it. And here's the deal. I may be a little psychic because I was right. Where did I end up working?
PWI?
I rest my case. You know, it's like, to me, it was important to go to those matches, see every show I could, and all of it, a lot of it stuck in my craw, and it really helped me when I did sit down and write my first wrestling article. So I don't know what to say other than charmed life in that regard.
Well, one thing I think we both have in common is that when we read these books, much like back when you're publishing your magazines, we're still longing to learn more and to find more and have more discoveries of bits and pieces of information we didn't know about it. Like when I was reading Brian Solomon's book on Monsoon, it was like I was so excited to read it because like I'm reading about the late 60s and I'm thinking in my head, well, I can't wait to read about the 70s. I can't wait to read about him and Heenan together in the mid 80s. And it was so much fun reading it and having the anticipation that I'm going to learn more and more within the next few hours or the next few days reading this book. So it's just a great way to celebrate wrestling and to enjoy your fandom is by getting these books.
Absolutely. That's a great capper for this one. And you have made your mark in the wrestling world as part of Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, the Arcadian Vanguard podcast, that in a massively crowded field of wrestling podcasts remains one of the top-rated shows and probably easily the number one nostalgia show. And I want to congratulate you, John, for all your success because the show never wanes. It's always the same quality and it's always a lot of fun.
Well, like I said, you got to give John credit for that. He's the idea man. And we are going to have Brian Solomon on. I know this episode of Outdated Wrestling Hour, this may air after our show with Brian, but we're supposed to have him on soon. So I look forward to that.
Yeah. It's funny when we record these podcasts, we don't always know the date when we're going to put them on. People assume that when they're listening that we did it the night before and stuff like that, but it's not always the case. Like as I have intimated on the show, I've had a little health snafu, right? So a lot of times recently I've had to record a whole handful of shows at one time, basically, just to make sure that I had the free time to go and pursue what's going on with my physicality here. But in most cases, I would love to be able to record a show on a Thursday, put that on a Friday. I think that would be awesome. Here's why we don't do it that way in these podcasts, folks. Try to find a guest who will come on a Thursday every time. It's very, very hard. It's very hard. It's impossible. So we record the guests, and I think you have guests on your shows too. You got to record your guests when they're available.
Right.
And if it's a finite amount of time, you've got to make the time to get them on. So it's work, but it's worth it because you know what? We're going to start our 4th year in January.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Or into our 4th year. I have to thank you again, you and John and Brian and all the people in the podcast world for supporting me. And you all mean a lot to me because I look up to all of you. You were all doing it before I was doing it. So thank you.
Well, your show is one of my very favorites. I love listening to you and Puccio every Friday morning. You get me through my work week, and it's definitely one of the highlights of my Friday every week.
Now, here's the question. Have we goaded you into getting some Carvel?
Well, I'm in Tampa, and
you don't have Carvel.
down
That's
here.
right. You used to have Carvel, but not anymore, I guess. Yeah,
I
they're
grew up in
regional.
Binghamton. We had Carvel on the other side of town. My dad would drive us over there. He turned me on to Black Raspberry, which was the best.
Yeah. Well, anyway, folks, this is the great Steve Gennarelli. Steve, thank you again for returning to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. I really appreciate it. And come back soon if you'd be so kind.
Well, thanks, Bob, for your generous offer to have me on. And it's been a lot of fun talking about our favorite wrestling books together. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Steve Gennarelli, everybody. Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Well, there's another one in the books. I want to thank Joe Puccio, and of course, we want to thank Steve Gennarelli for being here on this particular evening for the Outdated Wrestling Hour soiree. I think that's how you pronounce it anyway. Anyhow, write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. All of our shows are there. You can learn about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club, where for a nominal couple of simoleons, you can learn how to donate and contribute to our ongoing adventures here at the Outdated Wrestling Hour and the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Just read all about it on outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. Look for episodes of the Outdated Entertainment Hour, our sister podcast. The Outdated Entertainment Hour and the Outdated Wrestling Hour are both productions of Bob Smith Podcasts. And the Outdated Wrestling Hour is part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith singer with B.B. King. I was a blues singer named Robert Charles. We're going to do something on that in the Entertainment Hour very, very soon. People have been asking me when this. We'll just do one on me. Who cares? So anyway, yeah. Also, you can find this outdated_Bob on every other social media platform I can think of. There's probably a few more, but I don't know of. But what can I tell you? Outdated_Bob. Underscore is not a word. It's an underscore. I got to explain that. By the way, I want to give a thanks one more time to the Funky Bone. That's nothing to do with me. That's the name of our theme song here. It's performed by a great musician named Moran Ron Barron. Just a fabulous musician from this area. Thank you. It's a wonderful, funky song. And at the end of every episode, we play the thing straight through, 3 minutes and 5 seconds. So if you want to ride down the road here in the funk, y'all, just listen to it. If you would rather not, when the talking ends on the show, just shut her off. But I got to tell you, I put the whole theme on just to hear it myself. I love that song. So anyway, I guess that's it for now. We'll be back in a week's time. We come out every Friday. Please look for us on your favorite podcast apps. And if you do have a favorite podcast app, like Apple Podcasts or whatever, please subscribe. It really does mean a lot. In the meantime, my name is Bob Smith, the old professional wrestling writer for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Ben Strong Wrestling, Sports Review Wrestling, you name it, Wrestling Superstars, Wrestling Annual. Just keep going down the list. I also work for WCW Magazine, and I wrote for WOW and Wrestling's Main Event. It's quite a career I had in the wrestling journalism field, but now I'm a yapper right here. So please come back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour next week. My name is Bob Smith. And in the words of Ringo Starr, we say at the end of every show, and I've been trying to come up with a different ending, but I'm not going to because I think we need this right now. Peace and love, everybody. Like Ringo says, peace and love.